Hello and welcome to the first episode of General Cinematography. In this show, I'm going to be answering your questions about cinematography, whether those are high level or technical. In this episode, we're going to be looking at how to do lighting for a high-key beauty commercial at a 2-star execution. We're going to be talking a lot more about what that means right after the intro. Let's get it. And we are looking at our first question from Mr. Mario Jackson. And Mario and I have been friends for a while. He's been part of the cinematography database community in almost every form that's taken. And this is his question that he asked me. So, Matt, I may have a job where I will be shooting beauty lighting of women. I have a general idea of how to do this, but do you have any suggestions? I was going to use a 2K through some sort of diffusion, set a 3/4 frontal angle. It's a good start. Having a fill light shooting head on, also good, but not as bright as the 2K, the key light. Lastly, having an edge light. And then I asked him, is it high key beauty or darker beauty? It turns out it is high key. So before we jump into the execution, I'm going to switch into Cine Designer just so that we can all get an idea, get familiar with it. This is, of course, using Cinema 4D created by Maxon. And what I want to make the distinction between before we move on is the difference between fashion and beauty. Now, on some people's websites, DPs, directors, you'll see fashion and beauty just stuck together. I think it's really important to understand how the commercial industry works. Now, fashion is primarily clothing, watches, headphones, that sort of thing. It's a little bit different. You're typically on location and you're trying to show a lifestyle. So for instance, for women, if you're H&M, you might show like a really cool $15 dress, but then you see it on like this really cool hipster bohemian Brooklyn rooftop party. So it's like, oh, I want to be at that party. Maybe I should wear that dress. So it's a little bit more about, in my opinion, what's going on around the fashion. Whereas beauty is typically, for women especially, which is what we're going to be looking at here, is about cosmetics. So like a Vino lotion for your skin, Sephora makeup. And it's really about making the skin look really good. And it's about making the eyes and the hair also look really good. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at how you should approach this type of lighting for a 2-star execution. For your indie production companies that don't necessarily have all the money in the world, you have some money, but you want to use it correctly. You want to put it in the right place. That's what we're going to be looking at right here. Okay, jumping into Cine Designer. So to start at a 2-star execution, you're probably not working at a studio that has a cyc wall. You may be able to afford the studio rental, but in general, it costs a lot of money to light a cyc wall to make it look good. In my opinion, my advice to you, you can do whatever you want with this advice. If you don't have the budget to light the cyc wall properly, you shouldn't be using it because you're wasting money. You don't want to go into business. You want to land really high-end clients with this work, even if it was low budget. You want to execute what you can in camera the best you can. You don't want to shoot half-ass photography. And in my opinion, I've been on shoots like this where it's like, oh, we're at a great studio with a big cyc wall, but we don't have the budget to light it. That's not worth it. In my opinion, it's better to do what you can do really, really well. And that's actually going to get you more work in the future. So all that being said is because I want you at this level to be using a paper seamless. Paper seamless made by a company like Savage. Shout out Savage. This paper roll is just fairly matte, but a little bit shiny paper. And this case, it's going to be 107 inches wide. And that is going to be the length that's going to give you the most options for color. As for rigging, really simple is to use 2 C-stands like this, shove the 2 40-inch arms into the roll, put some sandbags on this thing. I didn't put sandbags on it in my visualization, but this is what we're using as our backdrop. Now, the question, of course, is on the right side of the frame here is the camera. And in this case, what are we using today? We are using a Red Dragon, and we're in 6K HD. So for instance, if I went to 5K HD, you'll see that it's a little bit tighter. Cine Designer does visualize that for you. So let's go back to 6K HD, and we're using a red camera. And what I want to show you here is that in our behind the scenes view is that we're right at the edge of the frame. So as you pull the camera back, and what focal length are we at? We are at a 50. A 50 is a good length for this. You'll see that I'm basically right at the edge of the seamless. And that's something that you can tell in Cine Designer is how far the camera is going to be given a backdrop, given a background, and focal length. So that's really important. That's really helpful here. So this is essentially the widest shot that you can pull off on a paper seamless, but it's plenty wide for beauty. Like I said, beauty is not about the clothing. I don't need to see her shoes. I really am going to be focusing on even tighter, but I wanted to frame up the widest shot possible. That's a really important thing. And you can start to understand from here the footprint that this set is going to take up. So let's move on to the very first thing that Mario was asking about, and that's the key light. Now, in my opinion, the key light wouldn't be the 12 by, or what we'll be looking at, wouldn't be the 3/4 side light. It would actually be this. And what we're looking at here is, I'll zoom in on it, is an area light 2K plus, I think is what it's called. So it's a 2K like he was calling out. And on the front of it is a medium chimera, a quartz medium. And inside of it is going to be a baffle, so another piece of diffusion, and the front is going to be like a full grid or a quarter grid in the front. And the idea is to fill up this aperture completely. You don't want a hot spot in the middle, like spotting this in. You want to fill it as wide as possible, and that's because it's going to give you the most predictable results. In my opinion, that's the reason I like to do it. And if we get specific about the position, this is what's called butterfly lighting, or there's a lot of different lighting for it, but I call it beauty keying, and for most intents and purposes. It's going to go right over the camera like this. You may have seen this on other sets before, but I'm going to tell you, put the light right over your head. It's going to be really hot. You're going to see it there. It's going to be in your way, but that's where you want it to be. That is how you're going to get this base beauty ambient lighting. And what I'm going to show you right now in Cine Designer is I'm going to turn on shadows. And now what you're going to be able to see, I'm going to grab our key light that is on a stand. I'm going to show you how the height affects this whole situation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the height of the stand up. And as we bring the key light up, and we come at this more aggressive toppy angle, we see that the shadow under her neck is really big, and it's kind of weird looking. And at the same time, it's not so clear here. You'll see shadows under her eyes, which is not usually what you want for beauty. What you typically end up doing is you almost bring it directly straight at her. Now, this is a very flat type of lighting, but you'll see why in a minute. This is the base. This is your security blanket, is that you have always this front push. Because if the client comes back to you and they're saying, this is looking too dark, we want her to look more glowy, more glamorous, it's because they want more of this front lighting. That's what they mean when they say that. You need to have this as protection. Even if you decide to turn it off and it's like, we're going to go edgier, I would really recommend always having this light there. Have it set up so that if the client comes back to you after the first shot, they're like, we really don't like it. You don't want to have to spend time relighting it. Boom, here's your beauty light. Keep this going. Okay, so let's go into, actually, I'm going to jump right into the second part of this. This is its counterpart. And I'm going to turn off shadows over here because it's going to make this just a little bit faster for everybody. So let's hop into a full screen view here. So what we have going here, we have our butterfly key light or our beauty light. It's very frontal, very low angle. But what you need to help complement it is what's called a low bounce. And in this case, I'm using a 4x8 beadboard, which is very affordable. You can use anything that's white, honestly, but 4x8 beadboard is what you're going to get from an Expendables company. This is going to help lower the contrast ratio. Now, some people talk about shooting beauty with filters in front of the lens. I will almost never recommend putting filters in front of a lens. Not today, not with how color correction works, not with the control you can have over lighting and the control you can have in color correction. I'm saying to lower the contrast, we want to use this low bounce. And to illustrate my point, we are going to hop back into Photoshop. So let's look at the first shot. So here is a render with just the key light. So this is just the 2K with the Chimera. And this is what the set's going to look like. It's very shadowy. It's a little contrast. This is what I was talking about with high key versus low key. This would be low key. If this is more of a high fashion thing, you could get away with just this light sometimes. You might want to go breezy, maybe not. Here we're looking at the lighting from that setup. We have a fairly soft shadow going on right here, but that's what we're going to look to affect. This 3D model doesn't exactly show up, but on a real person, they might have a little bit of lower eye shadow going on here, and you may not want that. So what we would do is we're going to add essentially the, what are we adding? We're adding this low bounce in, and I'm going to try to, hopefully you can see in this render, you know, the what's it called? These, I'm going to try to take these away actually, because they're kind of blocking the shadow. Let's look at the difference. So this is the lighting without the bounce. That's with the bounce. I know it's subtle, but look at the lighting under her chin. Essentially, we've lowered the contrast under her chin. We've added light under the chin. We've added light under the eyes. And also, both of these things are probably going to show up as an eye light. So essentially, we've added light from the top, and we're lowering the contrast by adding a passive bounce from the bottom. And I'm not going to talk about active and passive. We need to go quick for this video. My channel is still flagged. 15-minute videos, that's my limit. So that is going to clean up our key light. This is the basis of all beauty lighting. There's different ways of doing it. There could be a kino on top, kino on bottom, but this is a very elegant solution. Is actually pretty affordable, I think. You don't need this boom situation. All I'm trying to show you is that this is the placement of those things. So let's move on to what we were calling, Mario was calling his key light. I consider this, I guess it is the key light. So we are going to go for this 3/4 front light because that's what he called out. And what I'm suggesting here is to use another 2K with another medium Chimera and push that through a frame of, say, quarter grid or light grid. Now, I'm using a 12 by. If your room can't handle the 12 by, use a 6x, use an 8x. And the thing I'm suggesting here is do not actually bring this frame right up to them. That's like your gut reaction to do that. I'm going to tell you to not do that. And we'll explain that more in another episode, specifically about the distances you need to keep light sources from talent for different reasons. In this case, take my word for it. For right now, you don't have to believe me, but maybe you should because you're watching this show. Keep that light source backed up. Keep it big, but keep it backed up. You don't want it right on them. That's actually going to work against you in a lot of the cases for beauty. And we'll talk about that in another episode. I'm not going to be able to talk about that right now. We're just going to be able to get through this lighting setup. So 2K through there. And now, is it worth going to Photoshop? Let's hop right back into Photoshop. This is going to mean a lot of editing for me, but here is our render of that scene with our 2K shooting through here, and we have our beauty bounce. Now, what's essentially going to be happening is you're going to be balancing the light level from the side light and the light level from this 2K. So you only have to be dimming or scrimming, or however when you want to control the exposure. You want to deal with the ratio between light number 1 here and light number 2. These are the ratios that you need to get right. If you lean heavily on light number 1, it's going to be a little bit more even, a little bit more of that beauty butterfly lighting. If you lean more on light number 2, it's going to be more of that side lighting that's going to look beautiful. And it really depends on the person's face and the style of photography, but you can essentially dial between number 1 and number 2. That's up to you. That's your style. That's your steez. Let's look at what that lighting looks like. It's going to look like this. So essentially that was just the key light with the bounce. And we'll see that's a little bit underexposed. That's part of it. I'm leaning more on the side light in this case, so the side light's a little bit brighter. Here's it with the side light. Now, it seems like you might be able to just get away with the side light, but what's happening is that you have under the side light this base exposure that's very flat and very beautiful. Also, you might be getting highlights. It's a combination of the front light and the side light. That's what's going on in this beauty setup. That's what I'm recommending to you. It's up to you to pick the ratios. The last thing we are going to be looking at is adding an edge light, and in this case, I'm going to be calling it a hair light. Let's zoom in over here. What I'm suggesting is an ETC source 4 with, I would say, about a 50-degree barrel bouncing into up here another 4x8 beadboard. And you need to rig it, of course. It can't just be floating in the air like this. But this unit's going to do a very good job of bouncing into this. You could put shiny stipple on this if it needs to be a little bit harder. But this bounce is actually going to do two things. It's going to put a reflection in her hair and on her shoulders. It's going to separate her from the background. And it's also going to be illuminating this paper. So we'll see that there is no lights. This is the final lighting setup. And you'll see that there are no specific lights just for the background. And that is something that is going to save you money. We are passively lighting the background with this 12x source. That's going to hit the background. And then this bounce is also, because we're not flagging it off the bottom, is going to light the background. We are doing this beautiful lighting setup with 3 lights, a 2K, and a source 4. So 3 lights I'm looking out for you. Now, we could, of course, light this with more lights, but because this is a 2-star execution, I'm looking out for the budget. I'm trying to do this as slim as possible and have as many options as possible for on the day to make sure that the client gets what they want and then to be able to light up the background without lights. We've saved money. This is a fairly affordable setup. If you needed to go to 1-star budget, you could, of course, switch these out for cheaper lights and maybe don't use 12x frames and that sort of thing. So let's hop back into Photoshop for our final look at this. Here is the final rendering of the full lighting setup. And you'll see here, compared to before, the background is much brighter, and we have a big old reflection in her hair and a reflection and backlight for the background. So that is my suggestion for this setup from Mario. I hope that, Mario, you are able to use something from this. If you take away one tip, even if you're not doing the exact lighting setup, I hope that I've illustrated what the factors are and what the main players are in a lighting setup for beauty. So how are we going to end this? I have to look at my notes because it's the first time I'm doing this format. Eventually, I will not have to use my notes. So again, this is a 2-star execution. We're really looking at beauty. We're looking at skin, eyes, and hair. That's the most important part. And the crew size, I would say for this, because it's 2-star execution, I would recommend a key grip, a gaffer. You could probably get it done with just that. And if you have a little bit more money, a swing. Now, crew size is dependent on how much time you have to set it up. If you have time to set this up, like talent's not coming for like 4 hours, 1-on-1, you could get it done. Maybe the DP has to help out. The PS need to drop a hand in there. If you need to get this up in 2 hours or less, you definitely need to start thinking about 2-on-2 or 1-on-1. So key grip, gaffer, and a swing. It's all about time. If you need to get it done in less time, you need more crew. It's going to work out better for the budget there. This isn't a show about budgeting, but that's generally how I roll in this situation. So that is going to wrap it up for this episode. Until next time, my name is Matt Workman. Get out there, plan better, shoot better. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.